Thanks for staying with us. You're welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. As insecurity continues to challenge Nigeria's stability, security experts are warning that poor budget implementation, politicization of policies, weak national cohesion, and the constant demarketing of the military are undermining efforts to restore peace. They stress that security sector reforms focus on professionalism, accountability, and human rights remain crucial to national stability. Arise correspondent Friday Oloko filed this report.
From terrorism, banditry and insurgency to kidnapping and corruption, Nigeria's security landscape remains under siege, stretching the military's capacity and eroding public trust. Despite renewed operations and partnerships, deep-seated structural problems persist. At this 7th annual lecture of the Just Friends Club of Nigeria, former Chief of Army Staff describes calls by U.S. President Donald Trump for foreign military intervention as a ploy for America to establish a base in Nigeria, arguing the move serves U.S. interests, not Nigeria's.
To address Nigeria's security challenges, we must first understand what security truly means. As you know, Section 217 of the Nigerian Constitution says of the military's responsibility is to protect Nigeria's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Chairman of the event, Professor Tony Iradia, decries what he terms the comic size of Nigeria's defense budget, saying it reflects the government's lack of seriousness about national security.
They also know that our budget is a joke. Maybe we should hand over our budget to comedians. They might do it better because you pass a budget, the money is not released.
A former chief of policy and plans of the Nigerian Air Force calls for a holistic overhaul of national security, lamenting that the military's sacrifices are often undervalued and unfairly criticized.
You cannot have a nation that is blessed with the quality of individuals in terms of intellectual and other capacities, and we keep talking about, we should not have been together.
Other speakers blame ethnic divisions and weak national identity for undermining patriotism and the collective will to secure the country.
But the soldier the Nigerian sees on the street is not a refined officer sitting beside me. So the impression of the service that gets marketed is by the lowest level of that service.
Just Friends Club of Nigeria has since its inception in 2013 stood for social good, civic responsibility, and national progress.
In the end, speakers agree that tackling insecurity requires more than weapons. It demands governance reform, integrity, and a renewed sense of national unity.
All righty, we're now being joined for a conversation around all of that by Professor Okey Ikechukwu, who you saw speaking at some point in that package. He's the Executive Director, Development Specs Academy. Good morning, Prof. Good to see you join us on the morning show today.
Good. Same here, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning indeed.
And I hope you guys are preparing for the invasion.
All right, Prof, this is actually where we're going. This is actually where we're going. What a week it has been. Are we preparing? We should put the question to you, and let me start off by asking two key questions, Prof. I know I have an idea why you are laughing. First will be your overall general assessment, because the question that you have posed to us now is probably what is on the minds of practically everybody. Will there be an invasion? What does Trump want? But of course, you know that at the heart of what is going on is the challenge of insecurity that we have had since 2009 or thereabout. And of course, what this government is doing, especially what it has done in the last 2.5 years or thereabout. And so, therefore, the question, Prof, should be, what should our government be doing? And by government, I mean, first, of course, the president, and of course, the military apparatus. What should we be doing? Who should the president be talking to? You were close to the corridors of power, particularly the information machinery. What should be driving the narrative that government should indulge in at this point in time? And then the second question, Prof, will be that...
No, let me deal with the first.
Okay, go on.
Let me deal with the
That's
first.
That's fine. Go on,
please.
sir. Go on, sir.
Yes. You know, you say, what should we be doing? And by we, you meant the federal government and the military and security agencies.
Correct.
I'll expand the we beyond these two platforms. The we includes you and I. It includes media. It includes prominent Nigerians who speak in public within and outside the country. So if the media report about Nigeria and Nigeria's security is constantly and perpetually projecting a lot of confusion, a lot of success by insurgents, what the world will see is a nation that is in turmoil, as indicated by its own people and by its own respected media. So the question will then be, beginning with the first we, which is the media, what should we be doing? What we should be doing is not to make the activities of insurgents the primary headline, not to report in such a way as to suggest, you read a report, for instance, that, the so-and-so place has been attacked, and the bandits said, attacked this place. You find another report about the military having taken out some people. You say the army claims to have. The Air Force is saying that it did this and that. The reporting pattern already has some kind of prejudice, and that's what they are getting out there. And that will also be the focus whenever they want to make inquiries about Nigeria. So the first we is the media. There's what you call national interest reporting, as distinct from telling lies. That's number one. Number two, because as they say, you're not the one to leave your compound, your family house, and go to the village square and announce all that is going wrong in your family. Media is free, presumably all over the world, but the most censored media on the planet is that of the US and those of the other developing countries. They know what doesn't get out there. And like I said, it's not the same thing as asking the media to lie. Then when you speak of the second we, it's also us. If you send soldiers and security people to my village because of insecurity, they are strangers. They don't know anybody in my place. So if we don't give them intelligence, if we don't cooperate in that regard, if we don't say, there's this man we're seeing for the first time, we saw him for the first time 3 weeks ago and he's still here, if they don't get that kind of information, there won't be much help. Because you must bear in mind that these are officers and men who are trained to take on targets as professional soldiers. Now their training says the target is there, you're to do this and that, maneuver, do recce and take it out. They were not trained for asymmetrical situations where the target is embedded in a village. You want to drive out criminals from my village and they're living with us. So that's the other way. If you don't make reports, of course there's a concern, sometimes we've made reports and they came for us. That is the thing. Now, talking about the government itself, if you permit me, let me move from Trump to the government. Donald Trump of America would not have been saying anything about Nigeria if not that somebody told him something. He doesn't live here. So first recall that some prominent people made public statements about the condition of the impact of the insurgency and the leaning. And there's a formal public statement carried outside this country, apart from media reports, saying, this is what is happening. The Christians are being persecuted. And so that is number one. That's the thing coming to him. So it's information that went out. But the challenge is his response, no matter how genuine it is. One fact that will stare him in the face and say, what do you think you're doing is, Nigeria is a sovereign state. His concern is legitimate, and we're grateful for it. But the way to assist then would not be, let us suppose he says, you know how he carries on, I'm going to invade Nigeria to drive out, quote and unquote, non-Christians who are killing Christians. That would be a brilliant idea. But who will he bomb? Oh, he's in the northeast. So what will he use to determine which areas that you don't have people that should be bombed? So let's separate a dramatic statement from a feasible and possible and logistically conceivable line of action. An invasion, if it happens now, how do you disaggregate who to be shot and who not to be shot? I believe his statement is very important because it points to a reality we cannot deny about unrest, about banditry, about farmer clashes, and about also clashes that suggest all sorts of sectoral persecution. We need cooperation, not a war.
Thank you, Professor Ikechukwu. We need cooperation, but not a war. However, some people argue that parts of Nigeria are already currently at war, with territory being lost to terror groups like Mahmuda or Lakurawa or Boko Haram or ISWAP. We even have terror groups fighting each other. We have a group such as JNIM saying that they're now in the Kainji forest, that we have thousands of Nigerians losing their lives every year. In fact, in the first half of this year, more Nigerians died than in the whole of 2024. Thousands of people are losing their lives. If thousands of Nigerians are dying, does that not mean that we are in a war, whether it's a war against terror or the banditry economy? Is it not fair to argue that parts of Nigeria are actually already at war?
I'll come in there. Yes, when you see war as a situation of unrest, a lot of death, environments where law and order cannot be maintained, even when it's maintained, it can be disrupted at any point in time, and where you cannot say who can give orders and people will obey. Yes, you can say it's like war. If you also take the casualty figures, it's too high. And you also mentioned a lot of organizations. In fact, part of the major negative fallout is what is going on in the Northeast, where every day you hear about insurgents surrendering. And Governor Bulum and those who think like him are spending a lot of money on refugee camps. That is not the way to restore anything. Those people need to return to their villages and cities and local governments. When you've been out of a place in the Northeast for about 3, 5, 7 years, re-desertification occurs. So no matter the amount of money the federal government spends while you're in the refugee camp, it will fall under consumption. Development is not about to occur. That money will be wasted, and that's what's happening. So yes, there is a lot of confusion in the country when you're speaking in terms of pockets of organizations that are taken. I'm from the Southeast. Today is Saturday. On Monday, nobody will go out. It's been on for years now, imposed. But the question on the table for all of us is, to what extent can we say that the state is complicit? That's part of the concern. So your point about somebody can say we're actually at war. Yeah, there's a way, from a certain perspective, that is correct. Having said we're at war from that perspective, the other question to ask then is, how is this war going to be ended? What quality of leadership do we have? When we think of the need, how to end insurgency, usually our thoughts go to the military, kinetic, go and shoot them, get intelligence, but the question remains. What is the role of a ward chairman, a council chairman, a local government chairman, and a state governor? We look to the center for every solution, including if your neighbor's chicken lays an egg and is looking peculiar, you suspect it's the federal government. The truth of the matter is that when the lowest level of government is totally demobilized, not by any natural disaster, but by this inclination of the leadership to know their responsibility, there will be people to radicalize. There will be confusion everywhere. And recall that earlier I mentioned collaboration. Sometime, I think that was during the command of Major General M.I. Yusuf of the Multinational Joint Task Force, which comprised the military and security forces of 4 countries, Nigeria, Cameroon, Chad, and Niger. Some of us were their guests for 10 days. And the things one discover, you ask yourself, who is really carrying out this war? A non-African country has a facility there that will enable you see everything from the air. If I leave this studio and I'm standing outside and I raise my watch and it's me, they will look at me, they will focus until they show the time on my watch. With that, everything going on here is seeing the movements. What kind of help are we really getting from them? On that trip, we were flown by a helicopter from Maiduguri to N'Djamena. The pilots were Russians. Have we considered that what is going on in northern Nigeria is needed by the global arms trade, small and medium arms, that there is also, I wouldn't want to use the word international conspiracy, but there's an economy around the confusion in Nigeria. That economy includes arms trade. It includes also the skating for solid minerals, the confusion in Zamfara. I've been to Bukuyum. That's where you probably get more gold than anywhere else in the country. You have those protecting each other and they call it banditry. So yes, to that extent and in that sense, we can speak of, oh, there appears to be the climate of war because people cannot travel safely. Most sections of the country have insurgent groups. And the expectation and assumption is that there's a magic wand the federal government will wave, federal and emphasize, and it will end. A federal government can only be managing the federating units. Yes, there's also the question of command when you say, okay, the governor is really not the one who is the police officer, the police commissioner cannot obey him. And why I look at that with some misgiving is that it's been so for 20, 30, 40 years. So the fact that the governor is not, the commissioner does not necessarily instantly respond or reply, what do you call it now, to the governor, report to the governor, does not answer the question of why was there no insecurity all along since this thing came into place.
Okay.
I think from the days of military rule.
Yes, Professor Okey. I mean, you've made a lot of valid points, and I would like to touch on one of the things that you said, where you asked to what extent is the state complicit? Now, based on the points that you've raised here, I would like to also just get your own personal assessment of the state of insecurity in Nigeria. We've looked at the statements that were made by President Donald Trump, our response to it as well. And you've also briefly analyzed how we should take interventions and how we should also accept interventions like this as to whether or not they should even happen. But what is your own personal assessment of insecurity in Nigeria and the response to those claims that were made by President Donald Trump, the swift response that we saw? What are your personal assessments of those?
My personal view is that we are far more secure now than we were sometime in the past, and I'll give a couple of reasons. You see, I usually travel a lot, but I like route travel whenever the opportunity presents itself. I recall the time we could say, okay, we're going to Lagos with the children. I said, okay, on this occasion, let's not go by air, and we'll actually take off from Abuja with me driving to Lagos, about 12 hours, and you stop on the road, just the kind of thing that you wouldn't say they grew up with, but they got acclimatized to with that kind of living. Now, remove traveling to Lagos, Abuja to Kaduna. Remember there was an attempt was made on President Tinubu's life on that route? Then, of course, in the southeast. So you cannot say we are secure. That's a fact. You talk to, in terms of assessing insecurity, yeah, there's insecurity. To now say that there is no improvement at all, probably in the last 3 years, and all of that, that will not be fair or factually correct when you look at figures and other things. But much more importantly, in looking at that insecurity, there's a factor that must always be put on the table. And that factor is the absence of, if you like, a whole of society approach to security. The other fact is the impression created very strongly in some quarters that, look, why is it? It looks like there's something giving oxygen to the insurgents and all these groups because there are reported cases, people claim of where they're arrested, either they disappear or nobody hears anything again about them. So this impression in the background also hovers that, look, it looks like there are people who are really facilitating and funding this thing. We know of a case, for instance, several cases where you go to court. In one, a judicial officer was said to have told the arrested people who were brought in the language he knew they understood because they were from the area to claim that they don't understand English. I mean, I know senior military officers who withstood this thing with pain, and by not understanding English, the proceeding couldn't go on. And in fact, in one instance, I think that was in case of bunkering, where the court requested for evidence of the vessel they're talking about. And the prosecution said, well, these are big ship vessels that cannot. He said, well, I don't know, you have to show us the evidence. So how would anybody carry a ship, ocean-going vessel, to the court? Now, looking at all of that together, you then see that there are many variables which must be properly disaggregated so that blames are properly apportioned. How many soldiers, Air Force men, and naval officer personnel do we have in the country? What's our land area? They are now doing police work. So all security agencies are overstretched. And in the midst of that, you find that local wielders of political authority are making everybody who pays close attention to them to throw away the concept of patriotism. The way they live, the example they are setting, the amount of resources they squash, and you add to that the point made earlier about budgeting. Funding, you hear, oh, the armed forces have been given, let's say, 1 trillion. Let's just mention that for hypothetical conversation. Are you aware sometimes that probably 40% is released as against the 100? Are you aware that if you take 1 billion and then drop it, and you're giving it to me for operations, and I buy 9 MRAP vehicles, each of them, that money is gone? Then take it to the most fundamental element of the funding crisis that we overlook. If in 2015, you gave the military 1 billion naira, what's the equivalent in dollars? Now, if you bring 1 billion today, the equivalent in dollars will tell you that the military is being funded far less than it was being funded in the past. What the army was getting in naira, converted today, look at the dollar equivalent 5 years ago, 10 years ago, etc. Those are some of the considerations to put on the table. So there's need for deeper analysis and understanding of the issues.
All right.
The ranting in the wind, oh, you know, let them come here. Let them come.
All right, let them come.
Let's see who will not be a casualty. No, don't quote me. I'm not saying let them come. I'm saying, you know, that mantra of let them come.
I get
your point. They'll come here and then transform the world for everybody. That's not how it works.
Don't let them come, oh, Prof. The question I was going to ask, the second question I was going to ask you earlier, I'll throw it in now.
We've been asking, wait, hold on, Steve, hold on.
Yes.
You mean I've been asking only one question all this while?
No, I mean personally that I wanted to do a combo.
I'm leaving the studio.
Prof, you wouldn't do that. But I'm coming to a territory where you are an expert. And it has to do with language. And I'm asking, is grammar or the correct usage of sensitive words or terms, is it at the heart of the challenge that we have? And I'm talking specifically about the word genocide. If you recall, 5 years ago, during NSAS, the word massacre turned out to be something divisive. Were there killings or were there massacres? And you know, we went back and forth over what actually happened in Lagos during NSAS. This time around, the challenging word seems to be genocide. Are we experiencing that, or are we just basically seeing killings that are genocidal in outlook? And how do we therefore deal with this sort of a thing? Because you have put a challenge to the media to be patriotic, to be nationalistic, and to stand up and be counted in defending their country, which we must do. But then how do you do that without appearing insensitive to those who can point at their families who have been wiped off in different parts of Nigeria, in Southern Kaduna, in Benue, in Plateau, in Borno, in Zamfara? How do you say that what is happening may look like genocide, but it's not genocide? Is it killing? is a massacre without you appearing as if you do not care about those who are dying. What will be your charge to the media in that respect, and to government machineries, given the fact that the former information minister himself, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, came out a few years ago to say that they could see that what was going on was a deliberate target on Christian communities? Prof.
You see, in discussing interventions in the media, we must make a distinction between opinion and knowledge. If somebody gets up and says, look, I believe that maybe the world is coming to an end tomorrow, or that, all so and so people are being wiped out, that is no reason for excitement. The next line of action is to find out whether what he's saying is true. And if it's true, you act on it. So if Lai Mohammed said something and he had facts for it, that will then be a true statement, as distinct from a personal opinion, supported by anger, and all kinds of things we may not be aware of. So coming around to the substantive matter of genocide, killings, and all of that, there have been killings. There have also been instances where the people who were killed lost their communities, and those who killed them settled in. There are at least, I think, 1 or 2 instances I've had. The third element is that when you look closely at some of these things that's going on, like I've been quite involved in this to a degree I would rather not just go into. It is not today that Fulanese became part of Nigeria. Our Fulanese don't wear earrings. But we see most of those doing these things wearing earrings because they are coming from outside the country. And you recall when Bala Mohammed said that there was nothing wrong with that they were universal citizens. And if you also look at the facts, outside of any discussion involving Donald Trump and any other person, what is the frequency of kidnap, village rates, etc., all over the country? Is it higher in the south or in the north? Are Muslims not being killed? What rankles with those who are talking about the Christian killing is that it is so blatant and they don't see any action after that has happened. Why I choose to dwell on this a bit is that you recall that when the Kaduna train was derailed, I think about 4 years ago now, at least, right? Passengers were kidnapped. One of the passengers was the son of Professor Ango Abdullahi. Professor Ango Abdullahi, at the time of that incident, was the chairman of the Northern Elders Forum. I hope that's correct. Not Arewa, Northern Elders Forum. His son, that young man could have been shot because they shot a lot of people. I remember the unfortunate young medical doctor, the lady, but he was among those, Ango's son was among those apprehended alive. Now, assuming there's a northern Muslim conspiracy around that raid, what would have immediately happened would have been they would have released Ango's son. Please, and go and apologize to him. These were bandits, presumably fighting for a cause, but none of whom can be pinned down exhaustively to an ideological orientation. That young man was held for 3 months until the Ango Abdullahi family paid the ransom. These are the frightening facts. So even for those who are reported, and there are very serious reports about people from the northern part of the country being involved, as distinct from the north driving it. If you look around, for me, I find it confusing because if I'm getting people to kill off some of my villagers in order to take over the place, and I can't go freely, my own cousins are also being killed, somebody must have my head examined. Have we considered that really, comparatively, you have more northern politicians who are afraid of going home than southern politicians? So there are so many things in the mix that it will be an unfair and one-line narrative to localize it only on one thing. Because yes, the Christianity, nobody can deny that there's that feeling among Christians. Nobody can also deny that there's that feeling among some ethnic groups. If there's a former governor from the Middle Belt who told him that his family house was no longer available because we had taken over the place. We are living even in secondary school, in the schools that they took over. What actually does give some concern is, and it's a question you hear repeatedly, why is it that these people cannot be wiped out? Why is it when you kidnap people, of course, your call must go up through some tower somewhere. Why is it that you're not isolated? They didn't say, okay, if you bomb, you're also going to, have a lot of collateral damage. Why is it multiplying? That's the issue. Why is the military appearing hamstrung? Because people cannot find answers to these questions, most people will scratch their heads and say to themselves and to the rest of us, there must be something going on here nobody wants to tell us.
Yeah.
And that's why there's that lull. That's why Trump's position will be found exciting, because remember, religious leaders made this a public and international issue. They refer to the media, they refer to specific communities in which this happened. The question is, even with those instances, would it be safe to generalize to the extent of using the expression genocide?
Professor,
that would be stretching it a bit. But as for killings and those activities, I agree. But to speak of a genocide is too exhaustive. You speak of massacre in some instances. Yes, you can go to a place and massacre 15 people. That is massacre.
Okay. Professor, okay, just really quickly, because we've spoken about you've spoken about how that the violence affects both Muslims, Northerners, and Christians. However, we have not seen justice in certain actions that are taken against Christian communities in Nigeria. Now, of course, the word genocide is a legal definition about destruction of a group, whether in whole or in part. But very briefly, if we're talking about the people who are, you said some Christian priests have appealed to America and to Donald Trump, but there have also been indications that supporters of Biafra or IPOB in the diaspora have been agitating for this. What's your perspective on this, just very briefly?
Well, what was the first issue you raised? Sorry, just articulate it. In this last question, what was the first issue you raised?
Well, my issue was also about justice, about genocide just being a legal definition.
Yes. No, I get the context of the question.
Time, if we can just focus on those who have been lobbying the American government to designate Nigeria CPC or to come into Nigeria being supporters of IPOB separatists or Biafra in the diaspora supporters. What's your take on these people lobbying America to come into Nigeria?
You see, they understand that their interests, or they believe their interests will be better protected if a powerful nation like the US first understands their narrative and gives them some kind of support. But invitation to come into Nigeria, is not a feasible option for the simple reason that there's no way of disaggregating who to take on. That's the essential point to note there. But you see, they had reasons, and they have reasons for doing what they are doing. If there are counter narratives to that effect, is also for it to be taken on. The sense of panic and auto response that comes sometimes with abuses will not take us anywhere. There are clear issues to be addressed. Let those issues be itemized, addressed. You can go to the international community and make a case. It's for the government to make a counter case. In other words, this is what they are saying. This percentage of it is true, but this percentage is. But when you say everything is untrue, when you don't explain that some of the truth they are presenting are actually biased, they will then not take you seriously too, because you can't deny everything. There's a lot that's wrong. There's a lot of effort in dealing with those things. They've not been resolved. It's work in progress. But to deny that that the killings are going on, to deny that Christians have a right to feel, because they sometimes see these killings and there are no consequences, to deny it outright, you'll be dreaming. Absolutely. But to say that the nation is being wiped out, that's another extreme.
All right, Professor Okey Ikechukwu, we want to thank you for joining us on the morning show. Beautiful, brilliant submissions that you've given us there. Thank you indeed. Thank you.